Okay, so the S16, the S16 Pro, and the S16 Pro 4G. The S in S16 actually stands for Selfie. So it kind of makes sense for us to start with the front-facing camera, the selfie cameras. On these three smartphones, we have an 8 megapixel front-facing camera, with the main addition being AI Selfie 2.0, with features like AI Face Beauty 3.0, AI Portrait HDR, AI Smile Selfie, and AI Bokeh Effect. That's a lot of AI. But yes, if you're kind of basing your decision whether to buy this phone or not based off of pictures you're seeing on their website, you're going to be deceived. I can guarantee that all pictures on their website were not taken on the S16 or the 16 Pro. The Portrait HDR dynamic range on that picture, yeah, definitely not taken on the 16. The bokeh effect definitely would not be as accurate as you're seeing in that representation. But yeah, don't get me wrong, it is still kind of nice to see that entry-level smartphones are attempting to add features like these to their smartphones. And without a doubt, as time continues to roll on, they would get better at it. But definitely, there's still room for improvement. Switching to the back of the phone now, we have a triple camera setup on the 16 and the 16 Pro, with a 2 megapixel macro, an 8 megapixel main lens on the 16, and a 13 megapixel main lens on the 16 Pro and 16 Pro 4G, and then a 0.3 megapixel depth sensor. I can guarantee that the macro lens is kind of useless because you're not going to be using it. I wouldn't be, and no one would be using it. And then the 0.3 megapixel depth sensor isn't actually doing any depth sensing. I can guarantee that they're basically just taking pictures and with software blurring the background. So it's really just that main lens, the 8 megapixel on the S16 and the 13 on the S16 Pro and 16 Pro 4G. If you give it enough light, yes, pictures would look decent. Okay, so battery. On the three smartphones, we have a 4,000 milliamp hour battery. And that, in my opinion, would be fine. It's easily a one-day phone. Now let's look at some differences, okay? What are some areas where you would notice huge differences between the 16 and the 16 Pro? The display. With the S16, you have a 6.5-inch 480p display, while with the S16 Pro, you have a 6.6-inch 720p display. I've never been more happy to actually see a 720p display on a smartphone. 480p in 2020 should be illegal. So if you're someone who's really interested in, I don't know, I just said that. If you're really interested in display, then you're definitely going the 16 Pro and not with the 16. 480p, that sounds terrible. Moving on to the processor now, all three phones are running Android 10, which is good, with the processor being the Unisoc SC7731E processor, with the differences being the S16 has 1GB of RAM and 16GB of storage, while the S16 Pro and Pro 4G have 2GB of RAM and 32GB of storage. They're both expandable, with the S16 going up to 64GB and the Pro and Pro 4G going up to 128GB. 2GB of RAM. Like, even 2GB of RAM sounds awful in a 2020 smartphone. But again, because this is an entry-level smartphone, it kind of makes sense. Most people using this phone aren't doing anything power intensive. So it's just slight multitasking, occasional web browsing, and that's pretty much it. So if you're doing basic, very basic tasks on this phone, you should be fine. The only difference between the 16 Pro and the 16 Pro 4G is that the 16 Pro Max supports 3G, while the 16 Pro 4G supports up to 4G speeds. Okay, so another difference would be with design. On the front of the 16 Pro, you would notice they have a water drop notch, while the 16 Pro has a hole punch cutout. The back, also the camera bump, the camera array, the camera arrangement. The 16 Pro kind of looks like the Note 20 from Samsung. But I don't know, no one really is making a decision of purchase on the design, right? But one thing that would definitely affect your purchasing decision would be the price. Now the S16 is going for 30,700 Naira, The S16 Pro is going for 35,000 naira, and the S16 Pro 4G is going for 49,000 naira. So what's the verdict? Well, it's simple. If you can afford the extra 5,000 naira, just go for the S16 Pro. Straight up, yeah, that's it. But yeah, that's basically it. That's everything you need to know. Those are the basic differences between the 16 and the 16 Pro. There are entry-level smartphones, and yeah, you really should not be expecting too much from these smartphones. But if you did enjoy the video, yeah, don't forget to like and subscribe. And now I would see you in the next one.